Hey, how's it
Hi,
going?
all right, how are you?
I'm good.
Hello.
Hey,
Hello.
Hello. How's everyone tonight?
all right.
Not bad. When I woke up this morning, there was snow on the ground. It was beautiful. And then by like midday, it was gone.
Yeah.
It got like just above freezing and it was rainy. So now it's gross, but I think it's supposed to snow again tomorrow.
That's kind of similar to has been here, honestly. Yeah. Okay. Oop, okay. I'll go on camera for a second too. This paper looks really fun. So do you want to like actually really applicable? I didn't get to read all of it, but I read. I did a skimming, and I see some direct ties to the things I always mention about Levin's ethics stuff at the end of his research page, and he centers that again in the conclusion, and so that's cool. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I know we all just met, but anything we want to save like for introduction stuff since yesterday? I'll share my
I don't
screen.
think so.
Here we go. So is this true that last time we were here, was just that the Levin paper? What did we do last time?
Yeah, it was a paper where Levin was one of many authors, at least one of a few, on memory persisting through physical change.
That's the right one. Did we meet? Was that in? I just want to make sure that I didn't miss something.
No, I think it was just that.
Okay. Because this is today, and then that I'm seeing one that was in November, but was there one in December, or we just skipped that whole month? I forget for this.
No, we skipped.
Okay. All right. Okay, cool. So we had a 11 discussion last time, and we're doing a little bit more with Levin and our friend Josh Bongard today. How can I pull up this paper? I don't know. Do you want to start with any opening thoughts, or do you want to say anything about like what this group is, or like give it some context for the new year and kind of what we're doing, or like maybe something like that would be a good thing to do while I get this paper ready here.
Well, we kind of have to do that for ourselves. I'd like to have something in writing about like a mission statement for this group. But it's I guess a manifestation of what's been called reimagining cybernetics. So trying to take what is useful about this discipline from the past, seeing what it can. Well, that's part of why I like this paper. But seeing what cybernetics can help us with when machines look very different than how they looked when, like in the 40s to 60s, when this was really a field. So it was kind of I guess it was a version of this same reading group that read Weiner, The Human Use of Human Beings. Much of that was kind of like social commentary, and like some history of technology. Norbert explicitly talks about the difference between life and machines not being his interest. He mentions like vitalism and these kind of essentialist views of life that would separate it from non-life, but that's not his focus. Although that is the topic of the paper we read for today. So I guess this group moving forward, I want to try to consistently link it back to human use of human beings.
Oh, really? Cool. I wasn't sure. I'm okay with that, but
not like we shouldn't read something that isn't explicitly connected. I mean, maybe not link it back specifically to that book, but to ideas like from version 1 of Cybernetics. So that's why we read that memory paper last time. It was directly related to what was a short passage in Human Use of Human Beings, but one that was interesting to us about how it didn't seem to Norbert that memory could persist through metamorphosis because it was too dramatic of a physical change. And then the paper we read was about the persistence of memory through like pieces of the brain being reorganized, or the organism being reorganized. Yeah.
No, I think that's cool, and I agree. Like I think it's I'm not saying we have to do this in the context of we got our quote, we gotta make sure we gotta reference the Holy Scripture of Norbert Weiner's 1950 thoughts on cybernetics and society. No, but I think it's nice to go back. And I feel like oh yeah, you see it. I was gonna put it in with that, but I see it on there. I feel like I'm really happy to start with this, and it's sort of like in my mind, this group is a bit somewhere between cybernetics reading group and then like modern take on stuff, which I know my shorthand term for it is like the logiciel stuff, which is like logiciel is like code for people trying to really do things with math and like or formalization methods, I guess. And what can we do? What are like new things to do in that space, which I'm not super versed in, but I think it's like part of it, part of the work that we talked many times about in these groups. And then also sort of like the, kind of like the Mike Levin club. Not necessarily that we want to talk about him all the time, but like he seems to be a really nice centerpiece, and I really appreciate that he has his fingers in everything and all these different spaces and different pies and whatever, but also like I'm really glad to be reading this paper now, because I feel like I don't know if I came across this before, but I definitely know who Josh Bongard is, and in just a little like personal history in this sense. I guess I'll do this. Hold on. Like when I first came to the lab some years ago, we talked about Josh Bongard, talked about I think like xenobots or his like life forms as his trying to create these different things. We talked about him a lot, and I was like, oh man, like is this a path I want to go down? In terms of I could see myself like a path that I went down kind of a path I did not go down was I really want to dive into Josh Bongard's work. And it kind of was actually more well known to me at the time and more interesting than a lot of other things. And I didn't really know about Levin. I didn't know about a lot of people doing this stuff now. I didn't know about Fuchs. I didn't know about really much about Varela at the time either. And it became this thing I was like really was into from afar, and then didn't really get any closer because we went in a very different direction with Cybernetic and the development of great vehicles and kind of that path. So I don't even know. There's a very good chance I saw this paper a long time ago, but I definitely didn't read it a long time ago, and I don't have the context that I have now. So I'm quite excited to read this now in the context of where we've been after reading the Norbert Weiner reading group in that book, where we've been after this group, particularly all of us here with Cognition Futures for the last year plus, and the lab too, and then also kind of like a lot of what's in this paper, at least at the levels of like I'm going to skip all the way to the conclusion here, but like this last sentence mirrors quite a bit my interest in this. I don't know if it'll come up show nicely here, but where's your research? Yeah, here we go. Like this, he gets at it here in the bottom of his research page. I mention all the time, but social and ethical frameworks that will become essential in the future as forms of agents awareness diversify beyond what's currently imaginable. And I feel like that, what really nice tie-in that I'm going to keep hammering, even though we're kind of tired, but we're never going to be saying it, I'm sure, is there's a connection between that. There's a connection between what he's writing out here in the paper. There's a connection between, I think there's a direct line of, I don't know if I want to say ethical inquiry, but like legitimate concern about what someone who is seeing where certain technological theoretical developments are and what they mean for understanding and describing and talking about like the human experience or these broader things and like you know a lot in even just in the abstract he kind of goes on to say you know modern machine behavior maybe not apply as emerging disciplinary field looking at and I think the emerging multidisciplinary field he's talking about is machine behavior is that right or um, but because he goes and says key terms such as machine, robot, program, software, evolved, design need to be revised in light of technological and theoretical advances that have moved past dated philosophical conceptions and that have limited our understanding of both evolved and designed systems. And I think that's a really fun way to talk about it, as opposed to just natural and artificial intelligence. But it's sort of like I think evolved and designed systems is a really cool way to also implicitly put in the developmental stuff, a la cognition futures and the stuff we're trying to push cognitive science towards. Like he's intentionally baking in here, and obviously it's not a surprise for Levin's work, but like even just the framing of things is sort of exciting. So that's my first pass take, and we can hand the mic back to you, or if Bradley wants to say anything, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'll say something. So
Well, yeah, I agree. I like the framing. I like the framing as like there's a need for I don't know. It's the stuff that we've been talking about. There's the need for like an interdisciplinary language because the boundaries between biology and these various forms of machine science, AI, machine learning, those boundaries are blurrier than maybe they were in the past. Although, as he mentions, like machine metaphors have been used and there's been various versions of that for as long as there have been machines. They've been used to describe the mind, but with what machines can do right now, a lot of the things that we point to as like key differences between machines and living things are no longer differences between the two. So when you're looking at he calls it like machine behavior. I think that's what he proposes as like this new discipline that would involve studying like organic machine behavior and artificial machine behavior. I forget his language about that, but
I don't
yeah,
know
I
what
like
that means.
framed it as like we need different language, and that was the project of this paper, is like proposing different definitions for some key terms like robot and program.
Yeah, I don't know what any of that means. Like this paper, they try to bite off something that's, I think the idea is good, but I think the execution is flawed in a number of ways. So they, kind of get into this. Well, it's, is this like something like, genetically engineered organisms or these regular organisms, or are we talking about viral particles, or are we talking about bacteria, are we talking about mammals? And we're just kind of trying to fit this into a box as an opposition to what a machine does. And so I think the problem with this is like there are a lot of problems with sort of biting off just the definition of life versus machine. I mean, some things in life are very much like a machine, like transcription or like, replication, and some things aren't. But it depends on the organism you're talking about. So you can't just say this is life, this is not life. Even like with engineered systems, you have things you can evolve, like you have evolutionary robotics, evolutionary artificial life, and you have things that you have to design, like robots, or some people have tried to design or evolve robots because they found that they couldn't design them adequately, so they just wanted to see if they just ran like an evolutionary program, they could get an answer it's better. And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. But yeah, I mean, I guess their focus here is synthetic and hybrid bioengineering, but the problem is that like it's really kind of hard to get because like what is life is a very hard problem. So man, making that distinction is okay. Maybe it's not how we define a machine, but it's still kind of a yeah. I didn't get the sense that that distinction was being clearly made. Maybe I didn't spend enough time with the paper, but I don't know.
I wonder how much they really need to make that distinction, though, or if they can just gesture at these things that we call life, even if there's things that are in a gray area.
Well, I
And
mean,
say like, and then still say like machines have evolved. They've changed since the 20th century.
yeah. Well,
So as we work out the definition of life, here are some like dynamics that we can capture that machines can manifest.
well, yeah. Then you're playing with definitions and like you're making things even more muddled because you know what I mean. Like I guess how have machines changed since the 20th century? You have like smart toasters, so you put an AI in a toaster. That makes it different from say like a toaster of 1950. But in a sense, it isn't because you're just adding in control mechanisms, which if you go back to what Norbert Wiener was talking about, they had this vision of this in terms of cybernetics. So it's not really a new thing; it's just implementing it and making it more sort of going in that direction. But the kind of regulation that they're using is still a machine in the sense that it has this, it's working from data and it's, working from algorithms instead of something like maybe what life would do, which is maybe not algorithmic. I don't know. Maybe it is algorithmic, but
I think that's going to be, and then I'm going to go back to I'm going to briefly mention the quote from last night that kind of got a lot of attention from me, and that thing about so much of our daily lives is now mediated by computational devices and therefore becomes data. I feel like maybe some things are in many ways machines mechanically maybe are similar, but machines in the environment they're in is different in some ways very much, and the data that they potentially have access to, but it doesn't it is hard, and I always like that Bradley's very good, I think, at pointing these out. We're like, well, here's a really cool general thing that is of interest, but then where does it kind of pan out? What are the things that don't mix? Like yes, there's definitely things that are exactly the same and very functional and operationally aren't different at all, and those are still machines. But what are the things that make that different? And it's like it's to kind of step in a different direction also. And I don't know if we're going to go there next in the paper or not, but um, it's so hard because I really would wonder. I wonder what like Levin and Bongard would say about this specifically, because I think they know this, but it's like to make a paper about a topic and push it forward. The dilemma of the paper here is you have to talk about this thing. Like I'm pretty sure they would be like, yeah, there's a lot of things that are culturally different too. There's a lot of things that are like, big data and changing and what computate like the computation may or may not be different. It's just what can be done and the things that are affecting parts of the computation maybe are different. So it's sort of like you have to kind of, I wonder how much they really wanted to include into this, or if this is part of like other papers they're doing, because I don't, it's sort of like the dilemma of do you make a bold stand or not? Because if you make a bold stand about anything, um, you kind of have to be narrow in your point if you're going to do a paper, you know. So I'm really curious how that unfolds, or if we just go, or if you're like, well, nice attempt, but let's maybe improve this attempt. So I don't know. I'll defer to Amanda or Bradley. Do you want to say anything? Do you want to go through the abstract specifically, or do you want to move on? Let's run the paper, or
We can go through.
or we should go?
We can go through. Well, I kind of see abstract as kind of. We can go through the abstract, I guess. It's just kind of like I think we already kind of know what the abstract is, though. We've been looking at it for like 5 minutes.
And I put in some highlights from the introduction and the notion. That's what those screenshots are.
Oh, I also wanted to say I kind of am toying with this 3-panel setup, so we can kind of hey, see each other, and then do this here. But if you want like maybe this on top, or this way, or more text and less notes, let me know. But for now,
I think we could do without the Jitsi window actually, and then we could just see more of the paper.
more
That
paper.
was fun.
Because it's the paper. It's like if we have both columns, that would be good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's nice to say hi in the intro, but I'm happy to not be on camera all the time.
Well, I can still see you in my screen.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
I'm
you
on-
see it on the
in
side there.
recording,
Yeah.
but
yeah. Cool. Well, let me know if I'm whatever. So, do you want to talk about the highlights, or just go through the intro, or?
I don't think I have much to add. The table that I put a screenshot in, it's I think just the next page. That could be something we could talk about. That's where they're trying to pick out these antiquated notions of what separates machines from life.
I
and
might
then
take a moment to look at this machine part, just to go. I think we know it, but just to see if he says anything interesting here, because I don't remember what. To claim that things are or are not a machine, it's first necessary to specify what is meant by machine. Okay. We view these main aspects of a machine to refer to a device constructed according to rational principles that enable prediction to some threshold of accuracy of behavior at chosen scales. Machines constrain known laws of physics and computation to achieve specifiable functionality. In addition to the basic description, numerous properties are often assumed to highlight differences from living forms, living things. Let us consider some of these to understand what extent they're based off fundamental essences, and we kind of getting into that I think here. So machines are independent, life is interdependent. I guess that's a major thesis for what he's getting at. And so we could talk about this. There is no
Table. What's the
table of like.
Yeah.
There's no. I guess it's just there's the description of the tables here, but yeah.
Well, just what does the table say? So what does it say? What are the categories or what are the columns that they talk about?
We have for properties of classical machines that don't apply to life. Current and future machines are not distinguished. Current and future machines are not distinguished from life because, and proposed new emphasis in the third category. It's kind of like a bizarro Jeopardy category.
Well,
so how do we want to look at this here?
let's go through the columns, and then we'll say like what do we think about each example, and then keep going.
So structure is a single level. is it sort of left to right or just top down really?
Top down, but yeah, so structure a single level means that it's not hierarchical. Like, so life would be like, you might have, genes and proteins in an organism, and then the organism interacts with its environment. Whereas maybe like a toaster would be like, it has an imperative, has one job, and does it really well, but it doesn't. I mean, that's where we get into the 21st century machine, right? You can interact with your toaster or your washing machine, but it's just basically it has that one mechanism. But yeah, and then life, of course, would not be that way. But that's again depending on what you mean by life, where you draw the line or what you're referring to. And then yeah, so then go down to the next one.
On this column
Yeah,
is
yes.
described by a predetermined list of parts. Um,
And so yeah, and then machines arise from a design blueprint, which is, of course, those go together because if we have a machine like a dishwasher or like a washing machine, we can reverse engineer it. It's always got the same parts because it has a blueprint, and the blueprint is very important to the function. Because if one thing breaks, it doesn't work, and then we have to replace that thing. We can look at the blueprint and see and put it in. And whereas life, you can have things that evolve, you can have robustness, which you can also have in machines, but there doesn't seem to be a blueprint for life in the sense that we can say this is something that was preordained. It's an organism will evolve, and so there's no blueprint there. There's also no blueprint in development necessarily, although development unfolds in the same way generally amongst individuals of the same species. So these two things taken together, I think, are distinguishing sort of the aspects of life from the aspects of a system that has one job and has to do it all the time. And
it's the interesting thing about that sort of like these two are sort of also kind of go together in the sense of tightly constrained operation towards a predefined function and then highly efficient operation. Like you could say life is extremely efficient at certain things, but as sort of like I think sort of like this is a really interesting the simpler and this is kind of where it's interesting and kind of messy with the generational like centuries and in the past. Machines typically they're very efficient and they're very constrained towards a very specific objective, I guess. Um, and maybe it's kind of the behavior too. And it's a bit like I think that's the interesting thing. That feels like a very messy space to say. Well, machines, ancient and past machines were um, uh, very different this way, in that the machine only could do a specific, have a very limited, it's like goal range of goals or things that could be tailored towards it. And now that's different. I feel like I don't really even. It makes me uncomfortable to talk about in some ways.
well, in machines, I think that machines are always like, if you build a washing machine, it does like one thing, and it's very efficiently designed for that one thing. You can't necessarily then repurpose that washing machine for something else. Although maybe you can, but like then the efficiency falls off. Whereas in life, you'll see like sometimes you will see highly efficient things in life. Like there's some parts of molecular biology that are highly efficient, or we can our like metabolism can be efficient with respect to like the environment we're in. But I think the idea here is that this isn't predetermined. This is just something as the organism interacts with the environment. Um, that's how it comes to be efficient, or that's how it comes to find its mode of operation, or something like that.
I think, and you're kind of picking at stuff here, but I think like in the framework of this, like machines are independent, life is interdependent. Or I always say like, oh, like the pressure of biological systems is like it doesn't operate in isolation often, and you have to have these different parts that are like most biological things, the biological systems like the animals or those things like they they're juggling competing priorities.
Right.
So they can't just do one thing necessarily. But even saying that's quite messy to me. I don't really like spending time in that space. Um, but yeah, like okay. So they're saying they're listing these sort of generic traits of properties of classical machines, and I guess that means 20th century, not smart, not machine learning infused, not big data infused machines. Okay, sure.
Well, that's an
Um,
interesting point. Do you think that like machine learning is, if you put machine learning in a machine like a dishwasher or a washing machine, does it make it more alive, or better yet, does it make it more kind of or less maybe like a 20th century machine? I mean, we just talked about this last night with respect to like what, like I guess we talked about it with respect to like AGI and the paper idea. But like, what is it about machine learning? Is it like maybe more living, or does it just extend the sort of the imperative of the machine?
I think a really fun thing to bring in here, and I'm just going to mention this for a little bit, but just is sort of like a really nice example of science fiction from kind of getting wacky with this idea. Is a really great game. I love the game Read Only Memories 2064. And I'm going to spoil a little bit of it, but it's kind of this cyberpunky thing where there's a character named Turing, and basically you get to find out this mystery of what happened, and you get to choose: do you want to basically enable a lot of like consciousness in a bunch of machines or robots that don't normally have things like your smart toaster, for example? Do you want to give them this like personality or embodiment upload, or not? And you get to kind of, one of the big decisions at the end of the game is like, how do you play that out? And I feel like I'm referencing that because I feel like in sort of the wacky, goofy sense, it kind of gets to what we were just talking about in the sense of like, if you bring a whole lot of data and a whole lot of machine learning and a whole lot of computer vision to the smart toaster, like, is it what? And I think this is maybe some of the fruit of the paper, or at least conceptual idea is like, at what point does the toaster become, a toaster with eyes versus a more multi-purpose appliance? Like, where's the line for defining it? Is it a toaster because it makes toast and it presses a button and comes up down, or is it becoming this kitchen super appliance that now can? Oh, you look really tired. Do you need some extra coffee today? Like, where are those lines? And I feel like you can be wacky and silly about it, or you can fuss about it, and it's there's different ways to approach that. And it's sort of like, what is the most useful way to consider those boundaries and changing them?
I mean, yeah, it is. I mean, but that's still like a lot of people think that if like you put a chatbot in a coffee machine and it asks you if you need more coffee, some people might bond with that and think that it's sentient and all this. And we've talked about this, and
Yes.
yeah, and some people would just think of this as extending the usefulness of the machine. So it becomes like both, actually.
Like that's basically the big thing at like um CES 2024, the Consumer Electronics Show. Like, put the GTP, and now you can talk GTPT for in our car chat bot or whatever. It's like now you can. It's almost to like it's to the point where like there's the pressure to like you've got to mention you have the AI and you can talk to it. It doesn't really matter what your options are. Just like, okay, I know I can talk to it. Then I don't want to buy something that I can't talk to. It's not going to be able to talk back to me. It's like kind of getting to that point. Will that be something people give a care about 12 months from now? We'll see. Probably, but what does it mean right now? It's in the maximum hype it, it's pretty high in the hype train of like, well, as long as I can talk to interact with it, and then you got the other crowd that's like, well, we already have conscious AI happening right now. So it's like, okay. Anyway, we should probably try to plow through this next column.
Yeah.
Anything you want to say, Amanda, before we rush ahead?
So I guess about this next column, it is supposed to be related to the previous column. There is a left to right structure. And the titles of each of the sections of the paper, at least in this section, are things that the authors are disagreeing with. So we briefly talked about the machines are interdependent, but life is interdependent. Well, they try to give examples of why that might not be the case.
Mm-hmm. So for this column, current and future machines are not distinguished from life because built as multi-scale systems of active goal-seeking, because I guess these machines are built as wait a second, hold on. Current and future machines are not distinguished from life because built as multi-scale systems of active goal-seeking components, protean machines add or subtract components as needed, and so on. So like, I don't know. I don't know if you want to say anything about these points.
Yeah, I mean, well, this is assuming like some certain specific class of machine, because we've been talking about like appliances, and I think they're maybe getting at like machines that are more like cyborgs or something where I mean, I don't know if I'm trying to give like these very down to earth examples because that's what we have. And, you can just say that there's this mythical machine that does all this stuff, but I'm not sure that like that's, if you can build a machine that's like a human, well, then of course it blurs the line between machine and biology. But a lot of these points, these are things that if you have systems, say, that are multi-scale, I mean, we have technological systems that are multi-scale that have active components. You have, like all sorts of different types of evolutionary robots. That's what Bongard works in, where you don't necessarily want to have a blueprint. You just want to have a system that knows when it needs to add or subtract components or something like that. And then you have the business about goals is interesting because I know Michael Levin likes teleology in that, but we could get into that debate about how goal seeking are biological systems versus like a technological system where you have something where there's some adaptation, or like if you have a smart algorithm on board, or some other type of control mechanism on board where the machine will adjust its water usage or something like that. So these are all things that are an interesting from I think an engineering point of view, because there's always been this push in engineering to make machines less brittle, I guess, or to make them maybe more efficient through
More
sort
flexible.
of biological inspiration, more flexible. Yeah. So this is kind of I think where they're coming from too.
Maybe the next step would be to imagine a toaster that could sense the level of toastedness on a variety of kinds of bread and respond to that to get to the perfect level of toasted.
Yeah.
Or a coffee maker that could respond to the minerals in your tap water to do something. Like you could still imagine an appliance that has a more sophisticated interaction with its environment and is in that sense more intelligent. And then getting onto the third point, self-organizing systems modify their own structure on the fly. Maybe you imagine a toaster that if it's perturbed in a way that would break it, it can repair itself.
Yeah.
Instead of imagining like a primitive appliance, but then you add a screen with Chat GPT, and then you can tell it to toast instead of it having to press a button or something. I think we can use the appliance example and actually think of machines that would be intelligent in these ways. that could respond to their environments in a more sophisticated way, that could repair themselves. And then I don't think that's too hard to imagine, like a simple physical appliance that could maybe fix itself given the parts. Like I don't think that's too wacky, but then it is like life in a very important sense.
And what I was gonna go with that is like, okay, and then like what about the toaster that gets the place a whole different like that to me is sort of in the realm of strapping a sensor on the thing, which is not bad. But then there's another like if you wanted to break this down very specifically, and I don't really want to, but like there's another thing that I thought like one of the toasters like, oh, kind of gotten jostled is like right at the edge of the counter. And then now the toaster has this sense of like either I'm not on level ground or more evolved, oh, I'm like I could be damaged or like I need to be in the right space or like this sort of agency towards manipulating self and the environment, which is like a whole different um set of like and I'm really curious about this here when they say self-controlled allostasis, but these sort of regulatory things that the entity that may or may not be a machine is accounting for when it becomes. I think one of the most interesting things that I guess is kind of talked about here, but like one of the lenses I'm particularly interested in this discussion is sort of the agency and the competing drives that are there, because I feel like I'm curious how that comes up in the paper or like in this thing, because it's sort of um, I think that's a very stark line looking back. Is sort of is there sort of agency and competing priorities and having to select priorities or having a choice being made, and I feel like I, I feel like that if there was a way to tell what that choice was, to go again back to this quote, um, that choice would be a really fascinating data point. And I think it's kind of impossible to attain. But just to mention it, like I think that would be a really interesting thing to look at. Um, noise is exploited and fallibility of components are expected.
So basically, if you expect something to fail, and it has like a way to self repair or something like that, but that's again, we're talking about all these different technologies, but like then the question is can a machine put all those pieces together, or can you put them in a machine and then have the machine work without the machine like doing unexpected things? So like there's this book by Kevin Kelly from the 90s called Out of Control. And it's about like a lot of the technologies that were coming up at that time, like the internet and some other things as well. But he basically makes the point that, those kind of systems, those kind of technological systems are very different from what we have experienced maybe back in the early 20th century, maybe like telegraph lines or telephones or whatever. And so the whole thing was, about, I mean, the book is a little bit dated because some of the examples he uses are like, it was the 90s. So, but, he basically makes this point explicitly that there are certain ways that, you can't expect these things to work seamlessly. There is some of this sort of, unexpected behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're viewing, like putting a bunch of smart systems into conventional machines and then expecting them to be lifelike, yeah, that may be true, but you also have these unexpected things that are going to happen that maybe we can't anticipate. And maybe that's not good for a machine because ultimately it is a machine. And maybe we don't engineer them that way ultimately because we don't want them to do things that are unexpected. Yeah. And you know what I mean? I think you know what I mean by that.
According to Levin, though, that's one thing that makes machines potentially more lifelike. Like maybe old machines, I mean, maybe not, given what we were just talking about, but
Yeah.
classical machines' behavior is what does he say, predictable and linear, but then it's precisely that, in modern machines, behavior isn't necessarily predictable. That's a commonality with life.
Yeah, but I mean,
Although
like,
we might make a bad machine, it is interesting that that's maybe no longer a difference between machine and life.
yeah. Well, I mean, like, though, in the sense that, like, we know that we've talked about, like, large language models and how they can hallucinate and how they can do things that you don't necessarily want them to do. So, we don't maybe build certain capabilities into those machines. Um, and, but then, of course, the machine, a lifelike system might actually have some other imperatives that, so, like, you may have some unexpected features in an organism that actually allow it to survive or something, or it could just be something that has some really maladaptive behavior.
Or there's
But
just legacy parts that are just
yeah, yeah. But like with a machine, it's not something we necessarily would engineer things towards. So I guess that's maybe a little bit fuzzy still, but I think you see kind of some of these arguments that we made about like AI ethics and about like technology systems and how they kind of, you know, how you might expect some of these things, but not necessarily find them desirable. Yeah.
so. Uh, we can talk about this. And we go through this column and try. Maybe we can try to get through this. I think we're gonna have to pick up next time somewhere around here because we this meeting went by super fast for me anyway. But we've got about a little over 10 minutes left. We talked about noise. We talked about kind of talked about this already. Perverse instantiation. I think this is just wow. Perverse instantiation and creativity increasingly result in machines that are not predictable bottom up. Like, wow, that's
What does perverse instantiation mean there? I don't remember that phrase being elsewhere in the paper. Maybe I missed it.
um, let's see.
Like novel instantiation, I guess.
The ubiquity of perverse instantiation, automatically trained or evolved robots often instantiate the requested desired behavior in unexpected ways in AI has been cited as potentially useful way of designing machines. So apparently it means it's I guess it's sort of what we just sort of mentioned briefly was like these is perverse about like the training or just the unexpectedness. I think it's the unexpected. Oh, it did this, or like the go using strategies humans didn't use. Like is that
Mhm.
yeah.
That makes sense.
Um, get this out of the way here. So perverse instantiation, blah blah blah, and creativity increasingly result in machines that are not predictable bottom up. Okay, I get it a bit more now. So it's saying that just because of these things, it results in a there's a lot more unknown stuff. There's black boxes and there's behaviors that we don't know as such, and that is a current and future machines um, are not distinguishable from life because of this is something that blurs the line in that. Okay, that's what is being said, I guess. Any comments on that? We kind of talked about it already, I suppose. Um, uh, yeah, we'll try to tackle this column too, I guess. Proposed new emphasis, machine. So proposing a new emphasis on this whole topic of machine versus life stuff. Machines composed of parts with self-similar structure and function. What does self-similar mean here? Like,
Like seeing the same patterns at different scales, different levels, seeing similar structure. So maybe the cells use the same kind of activity to accomplish their goals as the tissue level does, and then maybe the organism as a whole demonstrates that same activity.
And what is when I say this column, this whole column category, is that what did they is that part of like their
Sort of, yeah.
are they
Yeah.
getting is this sort of like their the positions they want to take in the not position paper way, but like is this
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
the lenses they're trying to push?
They're saying that there should be a new emphasis given that like machines are changing and we should propose these kind of things. So these are things like that you see in life that would be useful. So the whole thing about machines making machines, that goes back to like nanotechnology, the early years of nanotechnology. And there's a paper by Richard Feynman. There's plenty of room at the bottom. It was actually a lecture that he gave.
Mm-hmm.
And it basically talks about like some of these machines that you can build at very small scales. And so the idea being I can build like maybe like a automated hammer like on my desktop here, but I could also make it at a very small scale, like the nanometer scale. And you can think, well, how do you manipulate like atoms? And the answer is to make these machines it's very small. And so the idea would be you can shrink down machines, or machines can make other machines at that scale because it's very hard to make those machines. So you have this sort of way of thinking about when you have a new type of system that you want to exploit, you just have to think of new ways to build them. And so this is kind of where they're going with that. And of course you see this in biology where you have molecular machines making like amino acid chains or something like that, and then you know that's it. So that's kind of what they're talking about with machines. It would just be like machines manufacturing themselves, basically, or self-replication.
Okay. Machines that make machines of extreme complexity. Yep. Self-controlled. Great emphasis on self-controlled allostasis. I mean, outside of what I said about agency and competing priorities and stuff here, I guess, what do we want to? What does that mean to you? I guess self-controlled allostasis and putting great emphasis on it. Like this big star, I guess.
Basically, that machines have a set point, a goal, like a state that they want to be in, and the ability to keep themselves in that state, in contrast to a classical machine that maybe has some kind of inertia, but then you stop it and it breaks or something, like, and it can't do anything about it.
And it like, is it maybe I'm being in wrong by saying this, but is this one? I mean, I guess these all are, but is this one basically saying a really important lens going forward will be what is the amount of self-controlled allostasis, and how does that, rather than machine or not machine, like it's like amount of self-controlled allostasis is a lens, or is that not what they really want to get at?
I don't know what you mean.
Okay.
Yeah, I think like the idea is that like we don't think of like a washing machine as homeostatic, and so we usually think of like a thermometer on a wall as homeostatic. If you have a house, the heat will or the air conditioning will kick on if the temperature falls below a certain range, and it brings it back up. Allostasis means that it can like visit other states if it needs to, but it has to be able to detect that and make a decision. And so this is the state we should be in. This is the state it should be in, and do all this sort of autonomously. So this is like the emphasis would just be like, how do you engineer sort of not only an allostatic state but something that can be self-controlled. So the thermometer, for example, on the thermostat would have to adjust itself. It would have to find not only the right temperature at the set point, But maybe if you had like a summer mode and a winter mode, and you could find those modes and make a decision. It's just it's just something like that, and then that gets into control systems, but also into you know sort of decision making and other types of machine intelligence and
Yeah. So and like but to apply predictability and control in machines just as they do in living forms. That's a very interesting. Um, I kind of skipped over this in my mind for some reason and thought about holistic certainty from uncertain parts, and just the general concept of like Levin's agental materials, and it's sort of like this. I really want to. I'm gonna let's start with this next time and just unpack that. Um, but like between this and these things and this, I'm like, okay, I have this particular image of basically in sort of the agental materials lens of you're building some stuff that's going to want to do something on its own. It's going to go in this direction, and you have a holistic certainty from, I guess, one lens or one viewpoint, while there's certain parts that are like not. So it's sort of a, a very particular take on a sum is the sum is more than a whole is more than parts of the something that I'm not saying right. More than just the parts together. Yeah. Okay. I mean, we could. I don't know. Any final thoughts on this? We'll have to spend more time here next time. But we're kind of the last few minutes on this or the whole thing, or any if our thoughts change in the paper at all since diving into this potentially messy table.
No, I think more clarity will come to these points by like digging into the text of the paper too.
Yeah, because I'm quite curious to see kind of what it is there, and I feel like, yeah, I agree. Any other thoughts for tonight?
no, I think it was a pretty good session. So we'll continue with this next time, I think.
I
Yeah,
wouldn't be opposed to meeting next week since we're still on the same paper and I'm free. We don't have to do this meeting every week, but
Yeah, we could do it next week.
I'm up for that for next week, just to kind of sprint through this because I feel like we're kind of just opening this like can of worm, can of worm, can of worm, can of worm. We're just like like pop, 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 and there's like hundreds of worms everywhere. And it's like, okay, and we go through each section like, okay, these worms can be nicely herded in this thing. So it just like you just like blew it all up right now.
And we open it with a smart can opener. So
we're gonna need some futuristic machines that can understand what we want and then use the advanced computer vision to sort out those. Oh, last thing that I have to share. I won't play it, but I'm gonna get like ad blocked from it. But okay, I'll just show this in the chat just because it's funny in its own way. But a very important moment in classical video game history is the moment in the incredibly humorously bad voice acting in the original Resident Evil video game, where I think it's Barry finds there's it's like there's sort of zombies and stuff in the place, but they don't know if there's zombies or not yet. But it's like, hey, I just found this thing, and it's really powerful, especially against living things, which in our context of our paper would include everything that is both a machine or not, which would be a really powerful weapon. So on that note, we'll conclude and see more about living things that maybe are not machines more next time. Thanks everyone tonight.
Yeah.
See you.